Waiters of Reddit, what's the worst first date you've ever seen? I definitely have seen a lot of awkward last dates. I used to work at a very small neighborhood restaurant. Everyone that came in was a regular. Most were couples in their 40s 50s out for a quiet dinner. But there was one standout. A very handsome man in his early 30s would come in. It seems. Only to break up with women. About twice a month he would come in with a beautiful woman and partway through their meal she would be crying. I always tried to clean the tables near them for as long as possible, but I never heard much of his speech. He always tipped well and was super nice to me and my co-workers. It was just brutal seeing him bring in a new lady and knowing what she was about to go through. Plot twist. He's an oncologist who takes terminally ill patients out for a nice meal to hear their diagnosis. I work in an Italian restaurant. A few years ago I waited on a guy and girl who met for the first time upon arriving at the restaurant. There were awkward pleasantries exchanged at the door and then they were seated. When I was taking their order, the guy asked if we had soup because he had mouth surgery a few days prior and chewing food was still a little rough. We don't have soup. So I explained that the softest food on the menu was gnocchi. He ordered the house gnocchi and proceeded to cut each tiny dumpling into 4 or more pieces and slowly chew each piece. He ate that entire dish over a 3-hour period and the girl stuck it out for the whole thing. She looked miserable and I'm pretty sure they never saw each other again. Pretty stupid of him to not mention he had mouth surgery before. Man and woman cozy in a booth. Different woman storms in through the front door literally dragging 2 kids behind her. Right past the hostess station to stand defiantly in front of the couple and proceeds to bitch. Dude was nailed. Oh man. Those kids though. I couldn't imagine the terror they had to sit through the rest of the night. Dude would not stop eating her f-king food. Other table actually noticed and we casually people watched the date together. Girl looked miserable. Asked if she wanted the rest of her food boxed up and she said no, but the guy was like actually yes. More a story of a non-date. I worked at a cafe and it was a small local chain, so there were 2 other locations in the city. This guy sits down for about an hour and comes up to the counter and asks if we can call around to the other locations to see if this girl was there because they had a date planned and he was sure she must have just gone to the wrong location. We called to the other 2 locations and they said they never saw anyone fitting that description. The guy stuck around for another couple hours, buying 2 more drinks and a sandwich, just waiting until we finally closed for the night. I felt so awful for him. He seemed so crushed. Oh. He made a comment to her about how he's not Jew, so she should order whatever she wanted. She was Jewish. Spent the rest of the evening in silence as he went on about how his ex-girlfriend was anorexic and so annoying about food. He was happy to be on a date with a woman who could eat like a normal person. So weird. Edit. One of the only times she spoke was to respond that she was Jewish. It was a quiet night in my restaurant and I was nearby doing side work. She seemed like a very shy person. I work at IHOP. About once a week 2 middle school early high school age kids come in and sit a table away from each of their parents and kiss and hug on each other excessively. One time I think the guy was getting a hand job underneath the table. The parents just maintain conversation and pretend not to notice. The kid is also a huge dickhead. Served a couple a few months ago. Every time I walked over, he would always be the one talking. And she would just be sitting there not having a good time. At the end I asked if it was one bill or separate and she immediately piped up separate. I go and take his payment. And as I hand over the debit machine to the girl, I see the guy take his phone out and start swiping through Tinder. Lol. He's like, late to the party here, but I was bartending in NY and watched this couple that had met on Tinder have their first date sitting at my bar. The girl was a complete maniac. Kept bringing up the fact that the dude she was with could be a psychopath and could murder her. He had given no indication of this, and went on Tinder while he was still sitting beside her at the bar. Kept telling him he was lucky that she agreed to meet him at all and she didn't think he'd be this boring. She ordered about 5 or 6 lits and several shots. He literally just had 2 beers. She made him pay for everything. My favorite part of this shitty show was that he excused himself to go to the bathroom and left through the fire escape. Absolutely brilliant. To be clear, there was only one official entrance and exit. This dude escaped out the back and she went searching for him. Straight up thought he had disapparated out of the bar. Had an obvious first date where the lady was grilling the guy on how much money he makes and he didn't really want to answer. It was awkward serving steak and salad during an interrogation lol. Why would someone do that? Olive Garden. Around 2014 or so. From like 7:30 close on a weeknight. Middle-aged man of sub-average attractiveness was sitting alone at a table with a glass of water, insisting that his date would be just a few minutes. There's traffic. At around 9:15. Manager had to come out and let him know that the restaurant would close at 10. And if he'd like to place a food order, he should probably do it now. He ordered a bruschetta appetizer and said again that his date was on her way and they'd order when she got there. 9:45. This beautiful woman walks in and awkwardly stands by his table. I couldn't hear the conversation they had. But the man then asked for a box for the appetizer and they wound up leaving together without her even sitting down. I was working at a Mexican restaurant at the time. I was waiting on a couple and I could tell it was a first date by the questions I heard them asking each other. Anyway, towards the end of their meal there was this Hispanic girl sweeping next to their table and the woman looks at her, holds out the remains on her plate and says, "Would you like to take this home to feed your kids?" I stood there in complete shock. This woman spoke no English, but she could tell this random woman was completely degrading her. The sad thing is she seemed like she really thought she was doing a good deed. Her date looked so embarrassed. I used to work at a little shitty diner place. Definitely not the type of place to bring a first date. There was this guy who'd come in every Friday with a different girl. He was a very good looking dude and was always super polite and very nice to me. But he was super awkward. The girls would look kind of skeptical as they walked in, probably because of the crappy diner scene. Every week, about halfway through the meal, like clockwork, the girls would develop these get me the FCK outta here faces. That's when I would bring the check. They always boxed up their food and left right away. I had the chance to talk to one of them while he was in the restroom. Apparently he wasn't harmful. There was just something off about him that the girls didn't like. His persistence is on point though. Once witnessed a date where the dude talked about how special he was and how his mind wasn't like other people's for the entire date. The girl was politely nodding along and every time she tried to get a word in, he'd cut her off. Absolutely brutal. Edit. The amount of women commenting on how they've been on this exact date before is. I work at a Japanese restaurant and one couple comes to mind. It was the worst for everyone else involved. We offered private rooms that have sliding doors. And this couple clearly was hitting off very well. To the point that after a few drinks, she had moved to his side of the table and they just went at each other's faces and bodies for about 2 hours. They could have done all that with the doors closed and it would have been less cringy. Still cringy nonetheless, but no. The sliding doors were wide open for all the patrons to see. Kids, big groups of people, wait staff, runners, etc. If I remember correctly, they tipped pretty bad too. So it was not a fun time. A guy got stood up. He then drank a magnum bottle of red wine, 8 glasses of wine, and ate 3 apps out of depression. His date called him and he started cussing her out. He asked for more wine and then I had to cut him off. So he got up and tried to run out of the restaurant with a bottle he grabbed from a rack. An off-duty cop tackled him in the lobby and then he shit his pants in front of everyone waiting for a table. He lied there screaming with the guy holding him down until the cops arrived and arrested him. This is my fondest memory of being a bartender at Olive Garden. Worked at Applebee's. This woman was the worst woman I've ever waited on. She was needy and slurped down her iced tea like there was a worldwide shortage. He was silent. He didn't talk once except to order his quesadilla burger. And she just kept going and going, prattling on. And she was mean too. Talking down about how people were losers to be servers. And how much better it was to work in a shop. At the end, he went to the bathroom and just never came back. He apparently jetted out the side door where the to-go girls worked and gave them a 20 to give to me. Worst woman was just sitting there and waiting for him to come back. I stood there at the service station just waiting for her to realize he wasn't coming back. So after 10 minutes, she just started crying, pushes her chair over, and flounced out. I didn't get a tip, but it made my night. Saddest part of that story. Quesadilla burger. WTF. I once had a guy come sit at my bar who was waiting for his blind date. He orders a couple of drinks to calm his nerves. Well, he probably should have slowed it down to keep his mouth from working faster than his brain. In a hoe. She shows up and is way out of his league. She is absolutely beautiful. She orders a drink and they start talking. I come back to check on them and I hear him talking about how much he hates children. He was saying things like how he hopes he never has any. And that he will never be stuck taking care of them. And how he wishes that kids couldn't be taken into public places so that he wouldn't have to be around them. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "Well, I have a daughter. And I love her very much." She grabbed her purse and walked out on him. But the look on his face was absolutely priceless. I've seen 3 popular mentions of Applebee's so far. Survey says Applebee's might not be the best place for a date. My ex took me to Applebee's on our first date. Our waitress was visibly miserable and told us all about her horrible ex-husband who still lives with his mom. Then she told us if she had a time machine, she would go back in time and abort her children. Also, the food was awful. Do not recommend. It was one of my first dates where the waiter definitely could sense the awkwardness. I was a junior in high school. I had been flirting with a senior for a couple months and asked her out the day I got my license. I picked her up from her house and within 1 minute of being in the car she got a phone call. One of her best friends died of a brain aneurysm earlier that day. I told her that we could delay the date and offered to take her home. But she declined and insisted we carry on. We get to the restaurant and she is crying at the table. I didn't say any words to her other than "Are you okay?" the whole date because she was either texting her group of friends or couldn't make out words due to being so hysterical. The waiter kept coming by and sensed how awkward I was feeling. Out of all my restaurant experiences, I have never received my enter-registered sign-in check so fast. The waiter was a true bro. Straight up, someone proposed last year during Christmas service. Everyone's clapping and cheering the guy on. He says yes, obviously. The night continues. When they were leaving, I seen her give the ring back to him, slap him and jump in a taxi without him. Dude just sparked up a smoke and walked away. To this day I have no idea what happened. He put her on the spot in public where she would be somewhat forced to say yes. A real dick move on his part. Not a first date story, but pretty funny. On my boyfriend and my second anniversary, we went to a small dinner at a nicer place. Nothing fancy, but not Applebee's. My boyfriend is on his phone trying to find an old picture of our first date. He dug through his phone for like 20 minutes while I sat there and talked to him. When all of a sudden 2 girls drop a note on our table. It said it's a first date. Talk to each other. And some other crap like that. Apparently they thought our first date was awkward and uncomfortable. Now every time he gets on his phone, even though it's almost 2 years later, I think of that date night. Edit. No more eyes. Young teenager brings his girl on a date. They are young enough that they need his mom to bring them. His mom is cool and offers to go sit at the bar so they can have privacy. He tells her no. He then proceeds to talk only to his mom the whole time they were there. Oedipus. Table for 3. Had a girl come into the bakery I work at to meet a Tinder date. This girl's cute and I had been crushing on her for a long time. So I was getting pretty antsy about watching her go on a Tinder date at my place of work. Anyways, about 20 minutes into her sipping her coffee, her date walks in the door. Takes one look at her. Turns around and leaves. She's starting to tear up while she dejectedly takes bites of her muffin, and I am trying to peel away from the rush of customers to go console her for a second while wiping down tables. Before I get the chance, a guy who also saw the whole thing sits down with her and they get to talking. And eventually leave together. That was 2 years ago. They're getting married now. I'm a waitress at a mid-range priced bar grill. Just yesterday, a younger couple came in. And as I greet them, I ask if they want anything besides water. Conversation is as follows. Girl: may I have a Coke? Or Pepsi? Boy: got. Aaron: I'm paying. Girl: water will be fine actually. My heart immediately sank. Because you bet your ass he tipped less than 10% too. Follow-up question. When you see a date going miserably, do you try to salvage or do you pour on the misery? When bartending a little on the side, I'd always try to get people talking. Get them both to try a drink I working on concocting. Ask what their weekend plans were, etc. Just something casual to get a conversation going that I could then excuse myself from to take care of other patrons and leave them to it. Was waiting on a table that had some plants beside the table. When I came back with their drinks, they were seemingly gone. WTF. As I rounded the corner, they weren't gone. Just ducking and hiding low behind the plants. The lady pulls me close and asks, "Is there another way out of here?" That's his wife sitting next to the exit. Edit. Sorry. Been a fine all day. Hilariously. There was a very discreet other way out, as the restaurant connected to a different restaurant through a hallway in the back. But this was obviously unbeknownst to them. So I said, "Nah, that's the only way out." As they tried to leave, she saw them. Things were quickly escalating. As I walked to the back with a hidden smile. I served coffee at fairs on random occasions as a young teen, 16-17 years old. A 22-ish-year-old from another fair booth came over and asked if she could trade a free coffee for fruit roll-ups. I said thanks for the offer but no. She proceeded to ask every day of the fair and get rejected. On the last day of the fair, this dude comes over and tells me how rude I've been to his girlfriend and demands 12 coffees in exchange for fruit roll-ups. I say no and his girlfriend appears throwing a tantrum about how this is the worst date ever. What? Not a waiter. But one time my aunt went out with a dude and his glass eye fell out and landed in his food. Best part was she didn't even know he had a fake eye. Obligatory not a waiter. But my friend has a favorite coffee shop that she frequents. And every time she goes, the same guy is there with a different woman. Every time. My friend overhears a man saying the same things. "Bro, you're gorgeous. You're the most gorgeous woman I've ever met. I've never met someone like you. Never. You're special. You're totally different from any woman I've ever known. You mean so much to me." By the end, the woman always looks either embarrassed, bored or completely frustrated out of her mind. And the guy always looks so disappointed and confused about where he went wrong by saying the exact same cheesy things to every single woman he dates. It's pretty sad. Really. Dude was chugging drinks at the bar before the date. You could tell it was a blind date and he didn't like what he saw when she arrived. He crushes like 3-4 more drinks in about 40 minutes when the date starts while she sips a glass of wine. Then he gets up and goes to the bathroom. After being gone for 30 minutes she asks me to check the bathroom. Turns out he left out the back door. She almost started crying when she asked if she had to pay the tab. I ended up comping the tab for her. I felt so bad. Biggest dick move I've seen. When I was in high school, my college-age sister took me to a concert. While we were waiting for the show to start, we noticed a guy and girl in front of us who were clearly on a first date. Their conversation was so awkward that it literally devolved into talking about the weather. Brutal. Because we're terrible people, my sister and I decided to make fun of the couple by mimicking their embarrassing conversation. After a few minutes of our antics, The guy half turned his head toward us with a look of pure desperation on his face. As if to say, for the love of God, please don't make this nightmare worse than it already is. I'm begging you. We stopped. A few weeks later, my sister came home from a party and told me, remember that guy we made fun of at the concert? I just met him. We're going out on a date. They are now married with 4 children.